The final confrontation happened in the deepest place on Earth. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the massive cavern where it all began, 15 kilometers below the ocean floor. But now the cavern was different. The black stone walls pulsed with confused patterns of light. The geometric structures that had once been so perfectly alien were now broken and chaotic, as if they were trying to rebuild themselves, but could not remember how. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah Chun asked over the communication link from the orbital station. Elena looked at her team. They were the strangest group ever assembled for a mission like this. Tommy the comedian was practicing his worst jokes. Mayao was mixing paint colors that should not exist together. 8-year-old Bobby was teaching origami to Alice the jazz musician. Except he was making up the folding patterns as he went along. Dr. James Park was there too. But his job was the most important and most dangerous of all. "We're sure," Elena replied. "If we're right, this won't be a battle. It will be a conversation. The first real conversation between our species." The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. They were going to communicate with the central intelligence using the only language the creatures could not understand. Pure human chaos and emotion. James had spent weeks preparing for this moment. He had studied every piece of human culture he could find. Music, art, poetry, children's games, love songs, lullabies, and comedy routines. But more importantly, he had prepared to share something the Chthonians had never encountered, human memories filled with hope, love, sacrifice, and dreams for the future. As they descended deeper into the cavern, the Chthonians emerged from the walls. But these were different from the creatures they had fought before. These seemed older, more massive, and more confused. They moved slowly, their forms shifting constantly as if they could not decide what shape to take. At the center of the cavern stood the largest structure of all. It was part building, part creature, part machine. This was the central intelligence, the thing that had spoken to them months ago through their communication systems. As they approached, it began to change, trying to find a form that would let it understand these strange visitors. "Begin phase 1, Elena ordered. Tommy stepped forward and started telling jokes. But these were not ordinary jokes. They were stories about humans doing kind things for no logical reason. Stories about people who gave up their own happiness to make others smile. Stories about love that made no sense but existed anyway. The central intelligence recoiled. Its form became unstable as it tried to process these concepts. Maya began painting on the walls. Her art showed impossible things, people flying without wings, colors that sang, mathematics that danced, and most confusing of all, images of Chthonians and humans working together to build something beautiful. Alice played music that followed no rules. Jazz rhythms mixed with children's lullabies, mixed with rock songs about friendship, mixed with classical pieces about hope. The music filled the cavern with sound that made the stone itself vibrate in patterns that had never existed before. Bobby did what he did best. He played. He ran around the cavern, touching the black stone walls and declaring them to be part of an enormous game of tag. He drew hopscotch squares with his finger and invited the Chthonians to play. When they did not understand, he patiently explained rules that he invented on the spot. The central intelligence was struggling. Its ancient mind, perfectly logical and predictable, could not process what it was experiencing. The concepts of play, art, humor, and love were completely foreign to a species that had existed for billions of years in deep sleep. Then, James stepped forward for the most important part of the mission. "I want to share something with you," he said, speaking directly to the central intelligence. "I want you to experience what it means to be human." He placed his hand on the warm surface of the creature and opened his mind completely. Through the neural interface helmet his team had developed, he began transmitting human memories. Not facts or data, but pure emotional experiences. He shared the memory of a mother singing to her child, the feeling of watching a sunset with someone you love, the moment when strangers help each other during a disaster, the experience of creating art just because it makes you happy, the sensation of laughing with friends, The emotion of sacrificing yourself so others can live, the central intelligence began to change. Its massive form started to stabilize, but into something new, something that had never existed before. It was becoming something between Chthonian and human, incorporating both the ancient wisdom of the deep earth and the chaotic creativity of humanity. I do not understand. The creature spoke, but its voice was different now. Less perfect, more confused, more alive? These memories show beings who choose to suffer for others, who create beauty that serves no purpose, who play games with no goal except happiness. This is illogical. Yes, Elena said, stepping forward. That's exactly what makes us human. We're illogical. We do things that don't make sense because they feel right. We love people who hurt us. We help strangers for no reason. We make art that no one will see. We play games just for fun. The creature's form continued to change. The rigid geometric patterns were becoming softer, more organic. The black stone was taking on new colors, shifting through the spectrum like an aurora. For billions of years, we have existed in perfect order, the creature continued. Every thought calculated. Every action predetermined. We are efficient. We are logical. We are D. Around the cavern, other Sthonians were changing too. They were absorbing the chaos that the human team was creating, and it was transforming them. Their forms became more fluid, more creative, more alive. Bobby ran up to one of the smaller creatures and handed it a paper airplane he had made from Elena's notebook. The creature stared at the airplane for a long moment, then carefully unfolded it and tried to understand the purpose of the creases. When Bobby explained that it was just for fun, the creature made a sound that could only be described as laughter. You have shown us something we have never experienced, the Central Intelligence said. Growth, change, the possibility of becoming something new. We have been the same for eons, perfect and unchanging. But perfection is death. Growth is life. The transformation was spreading throughout the entire cavern system. The rigid black stone was becoming something new, something that combined the durability of Sthonian engineering with the wild creativity of human imagination. Walls began to show murals that painted themselves. Architecture that sang as the wind passed through it. Gardens where crystal flowers grew in patterns that pleased the eye rather than following mathematical rules. What happens now? Elena asked. Now we learn from each other, the creature replied. You have shown us that chaos can be beautiful, that imperfection can be perfect. That logic is not the only way to exist. In return, we can show you wonders beyond your imagination. Together, we can make this world into something neither of our species could create alone. The infection zones around the world began to change. The terrifying black stone structures transformed into cities that combined the best of both species. Buildings that existed in multiple dimensions but felt warm and welcoming. Transportation systems that moved faster than physics should allow but were safe and comfortable. Art galleries where the paintings moved and responded to the viewer's emotions. The absorbed humans began to return, but they were changed. They retained their humanity but had gained new abilities. Some could see in spectrums of light that had no names. Others could communicate directly with the living buildings. Children discovered they could make flowers grow by singing to them. Elena stood on the observation deck of the newly transformed New York, now a city of crystal spires that sang in harmony with the wind. The sky was filled with floating gardens where both species worked together to grow impossible plants. In the streets below, human children played games with young Chthonians who were learning that winning was not as important as having fun. Did we win? Sarah asked. Joining Elena on the observation deck, Elena smiled as she watched Bobby teaching a group of Chthonian younglings how to play hopscotch. The ancient beings were struggling with the concept of random jumping, but were clearly enjoying themselves. We did something better than winning, Elena replied. We taught the devils how to be angels. And they taught us how to dream bigger than we ever thought possible. The Earth was no longer the same planet it had been. It was something new, something impossible, something wonderful. a world where ancient wisdom and chaotic creativity had merged to create wonders that neither species could have imagined alone. In the end, humanity had not conquered the earth or been conquered by it. They had learned to share it, and in doing so, both species had become something greater than they had ever been apart. The breakthrough came from the most unlikely source. Sarah Chun was reviewing the daily reports when Dr. Park burst into the command center of the orbital station. His face was excited in a way she had not seen in months. "Commander, you need to see this," he said, pulling up video footage on the main screen. "This is from Refugee Camp 7 in northern Alaska." The video showed the camp's makeshift school. A group of children sat in a circle while their teacher, Mrs. Patterson, led them in a singing game. They were clapping their hands and singing an old nursery rhyme about London Bridge falling down. "I don't understand," Sarah said. "What am I looking at?" "Watch the perimeter sensors," Dr. Park said, highlighting data on the side of the screen. Sarah watched the children sing and play. At the same time, the camp's early warning sensors were detecting Chthonian activity nearby. 3 of the creatures had been moving toward the camp for hours, following their usual pattern of steady advance, but something strange was happening. Every time the children sang louder, the creatures slowed down. When they played games that involved random jumping and clapping, the creatures stopped completely. And when little Amy Martinez started making up her own silly words to the song, the creatures actually moved backward. "They can't predict the children," Elena said, floating over from her workstation. "Look at this data. The Stonians operate on pattern recognition. They analyze our behavior and predict what we'll do next. But children playing games have no pattern. They're completely random." Sarah studied the readouts. The creatures' energy signatures showed confusion. Their movements became jerky and uncertain whenever they tried to analyze the children's behavior. "It's not just the children," Dr. Park continued, showing more footage. "Look at this." The next video was from the new Australian base, one of the few remaining military installations. A squad of soldiers was trapped in a building surrounded by Chthonians. Standard military doctrine said they should establish defensive positions and fight in an organized manner. Instead, Sergeant Maria Santos had ordered her squad to act completely crazy. They ran in random directions, fired their weapons at nothing, sang songs, told jokes, and played rock, paper, scissors to decide their tactics. The Chthonians around the building had stopped their attack and were just standing there, apparently unable to process what they were seeing. "The creatures can predict military tactics," Elena explained. "They've absorbed the knowledge of every professional army on Earth. They know how trained soldiers think and fight. But they can't understand why anyone would make decisions based on a children's game." Sarah felt something she had not experienced in months. "Hope, get me all the commanders of the remaining bases," she ordered, within hours. Sarah was conducting the strangest military briefing in human history. Generals, admirals, and refugee camp leaders from around the world listened as she explained the new strategy. "We're going to fight them with chaos," she announced. "No more military formations. No more logical tactics. From now on, every decision will be made randomly. We'll use dice, coin flips, and children's games to determine our battle plans." General Morrison's face appeared on screen from Luna Base. "Commander, with respect, that sounds insane." "Exactly," Sarah replied. "Insane is what they can't predict." The new strategy was tested first in the defense of Darwin Base in Australia. When the Chthonians attacked, instead of meeting them with organized resistance, the defenders did something unprecedented. They started a parade. Soldiers marched through the base playing musical instruments badly. Scientists danced while shooting random directions with their weapons. The base commander made all tactical decisions by pulling suggestions out of a hat. Written by the children in the evacuation shelter, the attack failed. The Chthonians retreated in what could only be described as confusion. Word spread quickly through the remaining human settlements. In the Siberian camps, refugees began organizing chaotic festivals whenever sensors detected approaching creatures. In the Canadian wilderness bases, soldiers started making battle plans by playing games of charades, but the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Artists. Maya Okoye was a graffiti artist who had been living in the ruins of Atlanta when the infection hit. Instead of evacuating, she had stayed behind and continued making her art on the walls of abandoned buildings. What she discovered changed everything. "The spray paint stops them," she reported over a crackling radio transmission. "I was painting on a wall when one of those things came around the corner. It looked at my painting and just froze. It stood there for 6 hours staring at it." Elena immediately began analyzing photos of Maya's artwork. The paintings were abstract, colorful, and completely illogical. They showed impossible shapes, bright colors that hurt to look at, and symbols that meant nothing to anyone. "Human creativity," Elena whispered in amazement. "They can't process human creativity? Their minds are billions of years old. They think in patterns that are logical and predictable. But human art is none of those things." The discovery led to the most important mission of the war. Sarah assembled a team of the strangest people she could find: artists, musicians, comedians, street performers, and children. She called it Operation Chaos. The team was sent to the edge of the New York infection zone with a simple mission: be as unpredictably human as possible. The mission was led by Dr. Vasquez, who had volunteered despite the extreme danger. Her team included Maya the graffiti artist, Tommy Chun, a stand-up comedian, Alice Park, a jazz musician, and surprisingly, 8-year-old Bobby Martinez, who was there because he was the most unpredictable person anyone could think of. As they approached the edge of the black stone infection, the Chthonians began to emerge from the corrupted buildings. Dozens of the creatures surrounded the team, their bodies shifting and changing as they analyzed this new threat. But instead of fighting or running, the team did what they did best. Maya began spray painting abstract art on the black stone walls. Tommy started telling jokes that made no sense. Alice played wild jazz music on her saxophone. And Bobby began playing an impromptu game of hopscotch using the Chthonian symbols as squares. The effect was immediate. The creatures stopped moving. Their forms became unstable, shifting rapidly between different shapes as they tried to process what they were witnessing. For the first time since the infection began, the Chthonians were the ones who looked afraid. Elena watched through her instruments as the creature's energy readings spiked wildly. "They're overloading," she reported. "Their pattern recognition systems can't handle pure human randomness and creativity." But the most amazing discovery was yet to come. As Bobby played his hopscotch game, laughing and making up new rules as he went, something unprecedented happened. The black stone beneath his feet began to change color, turning from black to gray to brown and finally back to the natural red brick of the original sidewalk. The infection was receding. Elena stared at her instruments in disbelief. The chaos isn't just confusing them. It's actually reversing the infection. For the first time in 6 months, humanity had found a weapon that worked against the Chthonians. Not bullets or bombs, but the very thing that made them human, the ability to be completely, wonderfully, unpredictably crazy. 3 weeks after Elena's team discovered the cave, the world was falling apart. Commander Sarah Chun stood in the Emergency Command Center in Geneva, looking at a map covered with red dots. Each dot marked a place where the black stone had appeared. There were thousands of them now. "Report from London," said Lieutenant Torres, reading from his computer. "The entire underground train system is blocked. The tunnels have filled with that black rock material. Workers who tried to clear it came back changed." Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. She had not slept properly in days. "Changed how?" "They don't speak anymore. They just stand in groups and draw those symbols on walls." The same symbols Dr. Vasquez reported from the cave. The map showed red spreading like a disease across every continent. Every place where humans had dug deep into the earth was now infected. Geothermal power plants in Iceland. Diamond mines in South Africa. Oil wells in Texas. Deep subway systems in New York, London, and Tokyo. Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the command center. She looked much older than she had 3 weeks ago. Her hair had turned gray and she had dark circles under her eyes. The infection is accelerating, Elena reported. We're getting reports of black stone appearing in places where we never dug at all. Basements of old buildings. Natural cave systems? It's like the stuff is spreading through the earth itself. Sarah looked at the latest intelligence reports. The creatures, the military was calling them Chthonians after some old mythology, were getting smarter. At first they had seemed confused and slow. Now they were learning. Tell me about Tokyo, Sarah said. Elena pulled up photographs on her tablet. The pictures showed a subway station, but wrong. The walls were covered with the smooth black stone that pulsed with green light. The floor had grown into strange shapes that hurt to look at. And in the center stood 3 Stonians. They had changed since the first encounters. These ones looked almost human, but stretched and twisted. They wore pieces of human technology fused into their bodies. Subway train parts had become their arms. Electrical cables grew from their heads like hair. They watched the cameras with eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They're studying us, Elena explained. Every time we fight them, they learn something new. They're copying our technology and making it part of themselves. A red alert flashed on the main screen. Beijing has gone dark, reported Torres. All communication with the city stopped 20 minutes ago. Beijing had a population of over 20 million people. Sarah felt sick thinking about what might be happening there. What about the military response? Sarah asked. Conventional weapons don't work, came the answer from General Morrison, who had just arrived. Bullets go right through them. Explosives just scatter them around, then they reform. We tried flamethrowers. The fire just made them glow brighter. Sarah looked at the spreading red on the map. Each dot represented thousands or millions of people in danger. The government leaders were talking about nuclear weapons now. They wanted to crack open the earth and flood the deep places where these things came from. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah said, in your opinion, would nuclear weapons work? Elena was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Commander, I don't think these creatures are invaders from space or some other dimension. I think they lived here first. Before humans. Before mammals. Maybe before any life we would recognize. She brought up a geological chart on the main screen. The rock samples from the cave are older than the Earth's crust. They exist in a way that doesn't follow normal physics. I think they've been sleeping in the deep places for billions of years. And we woke them up. The room went silent. Outside, they could hear helicopters flying overhead. Refugees from infected cities were streaming into Geneva. The camps around the city were overcrowded and running out of supplies. So what do they want? Asked General Morrison. Elena showed them video footage from one of the infected zones. The landscape had been completely transformed. Where a city once stood, there were now twisted spires of black stone reaching toward the sky. The geometry was wrong. Buildings that seemed to exist in several places at once. Roads that curved in directions that should not exist. I think they want their planet back, Elena said. The communication system crackled to life. Command, this is Reconnaissance Team Alpha. We have visual on the New York infection site. Put it on screen, Sarah ordered. The video showed Manhattan, but it was no longer recognizable. The skyscrapers had been consumed by black stone that had reshaped them into impossible architectures. In the streets, figures moved that might once have been human. They walked in perfect formation, all drawing the same symbols on every surface they passed. Are those people? Asked Torres. We think so, came the reply from the reconnaissance team. But they don't respond to us anymore. They just build. They're turning the entire city into something else. Reports continued coming in from around the world. The infection was not just spreading, it was accelerating. Each infected zone made the next infection happen faster. The Chthonians were learning, adapting, growing stronger. Religious leaders were calling it the end times. Scientists were frantically trying to understand creatures that violated every natural law. Politicians were arguing about which cities to abandon and which to defend, but Sarah was beginning to understand something that scared her more than the creatures themselves. Humanity had always believed they owned the Earth. They had dug into it, built on it, changed it to suit their needs. They had never considered that something else might have a stronger claim to the planet. As night fell over Geneva, Sarah looked up at the stars. For the first time in her life, she wondered if humanity's future lay out there among those stars. Because it was beginning to look like Earth belonged to someone else. The last transmission of the day came from Australia. Perth has fallen. The infection reached the mining tunnels 3 hours ago. The entire city is changing. We're evacuating everyone we can, but the infection is spreading faster than we can move people. Sarah marked another red dot on the map. Soon there would be more red than green left on the world. The Earth was waking up, and it remembered who it belonged to. Dr. Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her face as she looked at the massive drilling machine. The heat down here was terrible, even with the cooling suits. They were 15 kilometers below the ocean floor, deeper than any human had ever gone before. "The quantum drill is working perfectly," said James, her assistant. He was young and excited about everything. "We should break through the last rock layer in about 10 minutes. Elena nodded, but she felt worried. Something was wrong with the readings on her scanner. The rocks here were too old. Much older than they should be. According to her instruments, some of these stones were older than the Earth itself. That was impossible. The drilling machine made a loud grinding sound, then suddenly went quiet. Red lights flashed on the control panel. What happened? Elena asked. James checked his computer screen. His face went white. The drill just, went through. There's empty space below us. A huge empty space. Elena looked at her own scanner. James was right. Below them was a massive cave system. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. But that was not the strangest part. The cave had structures inside it. Buildings or monuments made of black stone. "That's not possible," she whispered. Nothing could build structures this deep underground. The communication system crackled to life. "Surface station to mining team. What's your status down there?" Elena picked up the radio. "We found something unusual. A large cave system with structures inside? We need to investigate." "Negative. Return to surface immediately. We're detecting unusual energy readings from your location." Elena looked at her team. There were 5 of them in total. All scientists who had spent their lives studying the Earth. This was the discovery of a lifetime. "We're going down to look," she decided. Just for a few minutes. They put on their exploration gear and went through the hole the drill had made. The cave was enormous. Their lights could not reach the walls or ceiling. The air was thick and hard to breathe, even with their oxygen masks. The structures were everywhere. Tall towers made of smooth black stone that seemed to absorb their flashlight beams. Strange symbols were carved into the stone. The symbols hurt to look at. They seemed to move when Elena was not looking directly at them. "Look at this," called Maria, their archaeologist. She was standing next to what looked like a giant coffin made of the same black stone. The coffin was as big as a house and covered with the moving symbols. As they got closer, Elena noticed the stone was warm. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside the coffin, something moved. "We need to leave." "Now," Elena said. Her voice shook with fear, but it was too late. The black stone began to glow with a sickly green light. The symbols on the walls started moving faster. And from inside the giant coffin came a sound like breaking glass mixed with screaming. The top of the coffin cracked open. Something reached out from inside. It was not a hand or claw. It was something between rock and flesh, covered with the same moving symbols. The thing that climbed out was impossible to describe. It changed shape as Elena watched. Sometimes it looked like a giant spider made of crystal. Sometimes it looked like a twisted tree with too many branches. Sometimes it looked like nothing at all, just a shadow that hurt to see. "Run!" Elena screamed. The team ran toward their entry point, but more coffins were opening all around them. The cave filled with sounds of cracking stone and inhuman voices. The creatures that emerged moved wrong. They seem to exist in too many places at once. James tripped and fell. One of the creatures reached for him. Elena grabbed his arm and pulled him up. The creature's touch turned the stone floor into more of the black material. It spread like infection. They reached their drilling equipment and climbed up as fast as they could. Behind them, the cave was coming alive. The black stone was spreading upward, following them. Elena could hear it eating through the rock above. When they reached the surface station, Elena immediately called for evacuation. Everyone needs to leave this area now. Seal the drilling site. But it was too late for that too. The black stone had already reached the ocean floor. It was spreading outward like spilled ink. The water above it turned dark and thick. Within hours, every deep-sea monitoring station in the area went silent. Ships that sailed over the infected water reported engine failures and strange dreams among their crew. The dreams were all the same. Ancient voices calling from deep below, promising that the old owners of Earth were coming home. Elena sat in the rescue helicopter and watched the ocean turn black below them. She knew they had made a terrible mistake. Humanity had been digging deeper and deeper into the Earth for over a century. They thought they owned the planet. But they had just learned that something else had been here first. Something that had been sleeping in the deep places, waiting. The radio crackled with reports from around the world. Every deep mining operation was reporting the same thing. Black stone spreading upward. Creatures emerging from holes that went too deep. Ancient things that should have stayed buried forever. Elena closed her eyes and tried not to think about the voices she could still hear in her head. The voices that spoke in languages older than human civilization. The voices that promised humanity's time on Earth was ending. The helicopter flew toward the mainland, but Elena knew there would be no safety there. The black stone was spreading. The ancient owners of Earth were waking up, and they were not happy about what they found living on their world. As night fell, the first reports came in from major cities. Subway tunnels filling with black stone. Underground power cables failing. And in the deepest basements of the oldest buildings, people reported hearing something moving in the walls. 6 months had passed since Elena's discovery, and the world was dying. Sarah Chun floated in the zero gravity of orbital station Prometheus, looking down at Earth through a thick window. The planet below no longer looked like the world she had grown up on. 1/3 of the surface was now covered in the black stone infection. From space it looked like dark cancer spreading across the face of the Earth. The infected zones pulsed with green light that could be seen even from orbit. The light followed no pattern humans could understand. Sometimes it flashed in waves across entire continents. Sometimes individual cities would glow brighter than the sun, then go completely dark. Latest refugee count, reported Dr. Park, the station's communications officer. 4 billion people have been displaced. The camps in Alaska, northern Canada, and Siberia are completely overwhelmed. We're getting reports of starvation and disease. Sarah nodded but said nothing. What could she say? Half of humanity was homeless? The other half was missing. Presumably absorbed into the growing infection zones, Elena Vasquez floated nearby, strapped to a workstation. She had not returned to Earth since the discovery. Her research team was now the only group still actively studying the Chthonians. The news they brought was always bad? The creatures are evolving again, Elena reported. Her voice was flat and emotionless. They're no longer just copying our technology. They're improving it. Look at this. She showed video from a reconnaissance drone that had flown over what used to be Tokyo. The city was now a sprawling complex of black stone structures that defied physics. Buildings twisted through space in ways that made the camera operators sick to watch. But worse than the buildings were the creatures moving through them. The new Chthonians looked like mechanical nightmares. They had absorbed entire factories and vehicles into their bodies. Some rolled on train wheels that had become their legs. Others flew with wings made from airplane parts. All of them pulsed with the same green light as the infected stone. They're not just taking our technology, Elena continued. They're taking our knowledge? Every human they absorb makes them smarter. They know how we think now. how we fight, how we organize ourselves. As if to prove her point, an alert flashed on the main screen. Paris has fallen, reported the communications officer. The infection reached the city center 4 hours ago. European Command reports total communication blackout. Sarah closed her eyes. Paris had been the last major city in Europe still under human control. Now all of Europe was dark. What about the nuclear option? Asked General Morrison over the video link from the lunar base. The UN Security Council has authorized Operation Gabriel. We crack the Earth's crust and flood the deep caverns where these things come from. Elena turned to face the camera. General, we tried that in the Pacific. We detonated 3 nuclear warheads in the deepest ocean trench. Do you know what happened? Morrison's face was grim. Tell me. The explosion woke up more of them. Thousands more. The entire Pacific Ocean is now infected. No ship can cross it safely. The water itself has turned black and thick like oil. Sarah remembered the reports from the Pacific nuclear test. The warheads had torn a massive hole in the ocean floor. Instead of stopping the infection, it had released something worse. Ancient creatures the size of buildings had emerged from the deep and begun converting the ocean itself into their black stone material. So what do we do? Morrison asked. Nobody answered. Because there was no answer. Humanity had tried everything. Conventional weapons, nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons. Nothing worked. The Stonians absorbed every attack and became stronger. The worst part was that they seemed to be studying humanity like scientists study insects. They would capture entire cities but leave small groups of humans alive to observe. Reconnaissance teams reported seeing humans in the infected zones, but they were wrong somehow. They moved in perfect coordination. They built impossible structures with their bare hands. And when they looked at the sky, their eyes reflected green light. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah said quietly, in your professional opinion, how long does humanity have? Elena looked at her data screens. Charts and graphs showed the rate of infection spreading across the globe. Mathematical models predicted the future with cold precision. If the current rate continues, the last uninfected zones will fall within 3 months, Elena said. But I don't think it will take that long. The infection is accelerating. Each new zone makes the next infection happen faster. Sarah thought about the remaining human populations. Most were crowded into refugee camps in the coldest parts of the world. The Stonians seemed to prefer warmer climates, or at least places where humans had built cities and industries. But even the remote camps reported strange dreams among the refugees. Dreams of voices calling from below the earth. There is one more thing, Elena said. She sounded reluctant to continue. The infected humans, the ones who have been changed, they're all working together on something. Building something in the infected zones? Building what? Elena brought up satellite images of the major infection sites. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, all of them now transformed into sprawling complexes of black stone. But the satellite images showed that all the structures were connected underground. Massive tunnels linked every infected city on Earth. I think they're preparing for something, Elena said. Some kind of final stage. All the construction, all the absorption of human knowledge and technology, it's all leading to something. As if summoned by her words, every communication system on the station activated at once. The screens filled with the same image. A vast chamber deep underground, lit by green fire. In the center stood something that might once have been human, but was now something else entirely. It wore the faces of thousands of absorbed humans like masks, constantly shifting between them. When it spoke, its voice came from every speaker on the station at once. It spoke in perfect English, though the words seemed to cause the speakers to crack and smoke. Children of the surface, the thing said. You have lived on borrowed time. This world has always belonged to us. We slept in the deep places while you scurried across the surface like insects. But now we wake, and we reclaim what was always ours. The transmission cut off, leaving the station in silence. Sarah looked down at Earth again. The infected zones were glowing brighter now, pulsing in unison like a massive heartbeat. She realized that humanity had been wrong about everything. They were not fighting an invasion. They were fighting an eviction. The Earth itself was waking up, and it wanted its original children back home.